Hi, it's hot chat time. It is time for us to have a hot conversation. I am Sharon Pender, President and CEO of the Capital Region Minority Supply Development Council and the operator of the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency Business Center, Washington, D.C., and the MBDA Federal Procurement Center. The council serves the state of Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia. Welcome to Hotcast Podcast, Minority Business Connection, Season 1. This is Episode 6. And so if it's your first time, we welcome you. And you can go back and see the other 5 episodes if you like. If you're returning, thank you for continuing on this journey with us because we have some great conversation for you today. Today it is with Dr. Irving McConnell, owner of the McConnell Group. Today, Dr. McConnell will discuss how his organization is coping during this pandemic and how they had to pivot. This is a continuation of our special series of showcasing MBEs, the untold stories of MBEs and how they survived during the pandemic, this historic pandemic. You know, it's our mission to continue to feature dynamic one-on-one conversations with CEOs, contracting officers, minority businesses, supply diversity professionals, and procurement leaders from some of the leading companies in America via our Hot Chat podcast discussions. We will highlight the challenges, success stories, resources, and opportunities that exist for our vast network of minority businesses. And we'll continue to spotlight our corporate members who share their vision to drive economic success and development and inclusion within the organizations around the country. But more importantly, we want to hear from you as we continue to curate stories. But, before we kind of go on, I'd like to acknowledge in the beginning of this conversation some of our premier sponsors, folks that believe in the vision, and BGE and Exelon Company and Pepco Holdings and Exelon Company. That's why Exelon is our title sponsor. Southwest Airlines, Hilton, Amcus, Capital One, CompuGain, JDC Events, SB and Company, and Shroud Priest, attorneys at law. But let's bring on our guest for this session, and that's the Dr. Irving W. McConnell. He's the founder and chief executive officer of the McConnell Group, a health sciences company. The McConnell Group has dedicated more than 3 decades of professional life conducting and overseeing R&D facilities. How are you doing, Dr. McConnell?
Oh, fantastic. Life's good. Fantastic.
Life's good. I love the positivity. Dr. McConnell, ladies and gentlemen, has managed numerous multidisciplinary research staff and held multiple positions at Schering-Plough to include toxologist, veterinarian, ophthalmologist, and laboratory animal veterinarian. You know, is it a requirement to be able to pronounce 7-syllable words? I don't know. He has also served as senior staff veterinarian for SmithKline Beecham and has held several senior management positions within Johnson & Johnson to include Director of Toxology and Laboratory Animal Medicine. He served active duty at the Walter Reed Institute of Research, Naval Medical Research Institute, and the U.S. Army Aeromedical Research Laboratory in Fort Rucker, Alabama. He continued his military service in the Army Reserves for over 20 years and special operations, serving in multiple overseas assignments to include Iraq. He was later appointed to the DoD, Department of Defense Global Emerging Infectious Surveillance and Response System Division, where he was the Assistant Deputy for Influenza and Zoonotic. Say that again.
Zoonotic.
You have to explain, what is that?
So the interesting thing, a lot of people don't realize, with all the diseases that we have around the world, 70% of them are zoonotic, which means they can get those diseases from animals. So people can get diseases from animal, or they can get those diseases from people also. So when you have that transboundary of diseases, it's called zoonotic.
So was that part of the discussion with this pandemic? And they were talking about in China,
no question about it. Yep, no
Okay.
question about it. Yep.
And so, so over the years, you've seen where there has been that direct correlation between disease
Oh,
that
yeah.
humans. Okay. Can you give some examples on that?
Well, when you hear about like swine flu and avian flu,
Okay.
when you hear about the Ebola virus, everybody wanted to know where Ebola came from. And when you look back in Africa, the colobus monkey actually had been found with Ebola. And then, but even earlier on, when HIV came out, people didn't realize there was a simian HIV also. So HIV meaning human, but the simian virus was already in primates. So the primate was that animal model. So when you look at some of these diseases, animals actually become that model for a lot of these different diseases that we have now today.
So how has that been transmitted? And I'm sorry, I jumped right into this conversation because it just fascinates me.
Yeah.
Not even giving back. Well, I'm going to come back and talk about how you even got into this, your choice, your career choices. But how does that transfer from animal to humans?
So it depends on the actual disease, because it can be something that's transmitted through respiratory, or be from blood and from bites. So it depends on the actual animal. So if you look at even like rabies, if you go down to Trinidad, I was actually able to set up the rabies lab in the Ministry of Health in Trinidad, because people don't realize there are bat caves in Trinidad, and those bats come out and they land on little kids at nighttime and give them rabies. So a few years back, I was down there doing the training, setting up the rabies lab, and it was one of the most amazing things, because they had an outbreak of rabies right after that, and Trinidad had the lab that I was able to build up, and they actually named the lab the McConnell Laboratory in the Ministry of Health in Trinidad. So I've been very blessed to be part of some amazing programs. Very blessed.
So let's talk about how it starts. So, immediately what comes to mind is like, oh, he's one of those prodigy people, one of those really smart people, right? And so how did it all start for you? Where did you grow up?
So I'm actually that inner city kid of Washington, D.C., but what's interesting, my father was a photographer at the National Institute of Health. And back in the day, believe it or not, you could actually, he knew people that worked in the animal areas of NIH. So he would bring, mice home or rats home and ducks. So I became that Dr. Doolittle, in the inner city of DC. So when people had a problem with their animal, they would always call me, and I just would try to figure out how to help. And so early on, I just wanted to be a veterinarian.
So early on, your dad's bringing home rodents.
Right.
And what are you doing with these rodents in the inner city of Washington, D.C.?
Just trying to make them live. And then we had a dog.
Okay.
So what I enjoyed about dogs, I've always had a German Shepherd, and I have one today. And what I realized growing up in the city, because I had a German Shepherd, I never had a problem of people wanting to beat me up or take advantage of me, because people knew I was the guy that had the big German Shepherd, and so it was my defense mechanism, where I didn't have to worry about anything, because where I grew up, they had the back then they had the Cater Street Gang and all these, but everybody knew me as the guy with the big German Shepherd, and we did not have any veterinarians in the Washington D.C. area to the point that we have now. So I had to go around and just look at other veterinarians. So when I was growing up, there was a Dr. Weber and Joe Barr were the only two African-American veterinarians in the Washington, D.C. area, but they were far away from me. So I would go to the local vet and then just take my dog there just to walk in, just to see what it was like. And
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious. So veterinarians were located in what parts of Washington, D.C.? They weren't in our neighborhoods.
Right. So Weber was off of Florida Avenue, and Joe Barr was over in District Heights. And the interesting thing, we literally just created a scholarship for kids just a couple of months ago, meaning the Tuskegee Veterinary Medical Association, the local group, in the name of Weber and Joe Barr, because these are the guys that were the legacy guys that influenced a lot of us to become a veterinarian. When you look at minority veterinarians, African American veterinarians are only 2% of all veterinarians. So kids are out there looking for that role model. So most of us are doing like double duty, just trying to be role models for kids that want to be veterinarians.
And there seems to be a growing, I would imagine, a growing demand for veterinarians, because there's a lot of folks who, I grew up in Baltimore and it seemed like everybody had a dog, but there's a lot of folks now who have a lot of animals.
Yeah.
And they spend a lot of money with their animals. And so it seems like there's, what I would imagine, there's an increase demand for veterinarians. Okay.
Yeah, and the business of veterinary medicine is something that I'm very interested in, because even within the medical profession and the veterinary profession, we don't teach the business of those sciences. So when you talk about being a veterinarian in a neighborhood, you can do that, or you can work for a corporation as the veterinary clinic. So one of the things that I'm always pushing is the whole entrepreneurship of building your own wealth. So instead of going for one of the corporate veterinary clinics, create your own corporation and develop multiple businesses, because it's very, very hard to have a veterinary clinic on your own, because it is a busy, busy job, doing surgeries all day long and seeing patients all day long. But if you have multiple people working for you and understand that business process, you can do extremely well. But that's something that we're just starting to talk about and just starting to teach our students how to look at the business of these professions.
I think that is a very, very, very good point. I'm gonna jump back now into growing up. And so when you went, so you grew up in Washington, D.C., and where did you go to undergrad?
So let's just back up one, because I'm really proud of the high school that I went to.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate, again, being in DC, but there was a school that was in Virginia that developed a lot of kids from DC, from Baltimore, Philly, Tuskegee, called St. Emma Military Academy. And St. Emma Military Academy has been the only African American military academy ever in the United States. It actually closed in, I think, like 72, but from years early, from the 50s to the 70s, it was, we produced a lot of great men out of boys, and St. Francis was the girls' school in there. So after St. Emma, I went to Tuskegee, which is down in Alabama, because if you wanted to be a veterinarian at that particular time, Tuskegee graduated probably like 98% of all African American veterinarians, because the other schools would not allow you to come in. So there was no option for me at that particular time. So I pretty much had to go to Tuskegee, and going there changed my whole life.
So let me ask you a question, Dr. McConnell. So at the high school, which I'm glad you mentioned that, at the high school, was that intentional for you to go there because you wanted to be a veterinarian, or was because it was a military school and you ended up serving in the service?
It was a school that young men that needed discipline. I try to tell people.
I really wasn't going to ask you that question, because they sent him to the military, so they got him off the streets and sent him to military school.
Yeah. So I always tell people I was the good kid that was always there, but I became an entrepreneur in high school, because we had
Dr. McConnell, you weren't an so you were hustling what? Go ahead.
Baby Ruths, oatmeal cookies, because we would have a movie night, and nobody would take candy. So I would literally just buy a gym bag full of candy and oatmeal cookies, and back then they were a nickel, and I would sell them for a quarter, and they would get upset that I was overcharging them, and that's where I just realized I just started seeing the opportunities about supply and demand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So Tuskegee, of course, which is just renowned.
Yes.
And what it does. So tell me, what you said that was life-changing for you. What was that aha for you there?
Yeah. So, being from the city, I didn't have a lot of exposure with farm animals, and Tuskegee gave me that opportunity. And when I look back at my life, was I the smartest guy on the block? No, not really. But Tuskegee really helped nurture me to be who I am today, and that's why I've been very, very active with the university since the day I graduated, because I really feel if there was no Tuskegee, where would I be today? And I say that again, if there was no Tuskegee, where a lot of us would be, because Tuskegee has a lot of rich history. When people know from the Charles Drew story, when he was leaving Tuskegee, everybody knows about, Rosa Parks, but people don't know their influence in Tuskegee. Valerie Jarrett's family, is from Tuskegee. A lot of people don't know that, so Tuskegee is a really, really rich town and community. But from the university standpoint, Tuskegee, even to this day, will take a risk on you and give you that opportunity if you show them you have what it takes. And that's why I feel really, really grateful, having gone there. And so when you fast forward and you do undergrad and you get exposed to all of the animal science classes. So Tuskegee had a unique program where you could major in animal science, and they had an option to major in animal science with business. And I went that business option. And I try to tell most students now to go with the science piece, but take the business also, because it will help you in your everyday life. So you take economics and you take accounting, and those extra classes will actually help you in everyday life. But most people just want to take the science piece without understanding the advantage of the business. So when I went to vet school, I ran into a dilemma because the cost at that particular time didn't seem like a lot of money. But for me personally, I didn't have the funds to pay for veterinary school. So I decided to look at an Army scholarship that they had. And most of my friends were like, no, you don't go in the Army. And I said, there's a scholarship called the U.S. Army Health Professions Scholarship Program for medical doctors and dentists and veterinarians, where they will pay for all of your schooling, buy all of your books, buy all of your surgical instruments, everything that you need, and give you a stipend every month. And when you graduate, you go into the military. So that was a no-brainer for me. And so I literally walked out of veterinary school without owing any money to anyone. And I try to still explain that to a lot of people to look at, but most people are just a little afraid or intimidated about joining the military, because everybody thinks, you're going to go, to war, you're going to be in combat, but everybody does not do that. But for me, it was just so wonderful, because I got extra training. I came right back home to Washington, D.C., and worked at one of the most prestigious research facilities in the world, at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. And that was my first job. And I had one of the best mentors that I could have ever asked for. And that mentor with that particular first job, just sort of set me off in the research world. And I fell in love with the what we call the R&D space, from developing drugs to developing medical devices, which was just a really, really great opportunity for me. So that's how it started. And then I went to the Naval Medical Research Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. At that particular time, I got a phone call one night from the Naval Academy that the Naval Academy goat was dying. So I took the van from the research facility and went to Annapolis to get the naval goat and brought it back to the research facility in Bethesda. And my boss, didn't think that was a smart idea. The next day when he saw this goat there, and he said, "Well, what's going to happen?" And I said, "Well, I got to take care of this goat." And he said, "Well, what if it dies? That's going to be all in the news. Army veterinarian kills naval goat." And I just told him, it won't happen on my watch. So
that is hilarious.
So it worked out extremely well, and the goat was saved. And I got to visit the Naval Academy for all kind of things after saving the goat. So that worked out really well. And then with the way the military works, they send you to different opportunities, we call it. And my next opportunity was to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is the helicopter school. And my job was to help develop night vision goggles and bulletproof vests. And that took me into a whole nother area.
And that was that the research and development part of you?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that was, again, taking me out of my comfort level. And then I found out I was, just that exposure gave me training to go into a lot of different areas. And then at that point, I had finished that tour, and the military wanted me to go to Korea. And I decided to look at my options at that particular point because I had completed 3 tours, which paid back my time that I owed the military. And I decided to go into corporate America. And that's when I had my first job, where I worked at Shearing Plow. But I went into the Army Reserves at the same time. And what some people don't realize, there's one group within the U.S. Army that has a Special Operations Reserve group, and that's called Civil Affairs. I spent 20 years in Civil Affairs, literally going around the world, developing programs in the area of agriculture and medical. So if you look at classical swine fever, I discovered classical swine fever in Haiti back in 19.
Hold it. Step back again. You did what now? You discovered?
Right, classical swine fever, which is a disease that was devastating the country of Haiti and killing all of their pigs. And so that was a pivotal point in my life and career also. So that particular opportunity, gave me more of probably a larger network to look at infectious diseases also. So I had to interact with the USDA. I basically got on a plane, which you should not be able to do, with tissues and a facility in Plum Island, which is the foreign animal disease facility for USDA. They actually did all the sampling of it. Then I went to the USDA and had a whole discussion with them, and then USDA decided to help Haiti with this particular problem. And I was always fascinated with infectious diseases anyway. It's just something that I've enjoyed, doing my career. Yeah.
Sounds like it can be a little bit dangerous as well. And so.
Yeah, but that's the fun of it. That's
the fun of it.
Yeah. I guess my whole life has been around the excitement when because in civil affairs and special operations, we're the group that goes in basically when nobody else wants to go. When you look at Iraq, when that popped up, A lot of people are trying to figure out, well, why would a veterinarian have to go to Iraq for anything? But what people don't realize, in Iraq, there were a lot of diseases in that particular country that we didn't even know what was there because they didn't report any of the diseases. So I was the senior special ops veterinarian in Iraq. So my job was to look at diseases from Basra all the way to Baghdad. So I had a team that we would travel and do assessments around that whole area, and then feed that information back to the people that needed to know what was going on. And
fascinating.
Yeah, it was a long time away from home, but it was a great opportunity to be exposed to something like that.
And it's really interesting. I love how you characterize everything as opportunity. I have a burning question. I got to go back to the pigs in Haiti.
Yeah, sure.
When you then go and, I guess, implement the cure for, because I would imagine that, you talk about the infectious disease in pigs, but that's going to impact food. It's going to impact a lot of things, correct?
Yeah.
And so it's not just the pig as an animal. It's the pig as a part of the whole ecosystem, I would imagine.
Yep.
And so how do you deploy or implement?
So the sad thing about it is that when you have something like classical swine fever or African swine fever, which are very similar, that devastate places like Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haiti, and this gets to be a political issue. When you look at a disease in Haiti, you try to look at, how can you prevent it? How can you stop it? And the decision that higher ups made at that particular time for Haiti was to let it run its course. And that decision was made way above my pay grade. I'm not going to say if I totally agree with it one way or the other, but Haiti has consistently got a bad shot at a lot of different times.
Absolutely, it has. I remember during the whole immigration piece. Absolutely, it has.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's devastation in terms of the hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
so that's interesting.
Yeah, and again, from a political point, we had a lot of interest in the DR, the Dominican Republic, and I love the DR, but we, basically, again, way up above my pay grade, and at that point, it wasn't a military operation. It was more of a U.S. government operation to really decide to help the DR, because when you have a disease on an island, and the Haiti and the DR share the same land basically, and it's just split. But if you have a disease, just like with COVID or anything else, it's going to get across the border and affect other animals, and that's what happened in the DR. But there was a plan to stop that in the DR, but in Haiti it sort of ran its course.
Okay. And Dr. McConnell, and I'm gonna have to kind of jump over some things, because I want to get to you certainly laid the foundation in terms of your love of what you're doing and how it has expanded into other areas, the veterinarian science, to the research and development and other aspects in your time in the service. How did you come to create the McConnell Group?
Yeah, so interesting question. So I was working at Johnson & Johnson, and again, when you talk about mentors, I had really, really great mentors. And my daughter had actually gotten sick, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. She would have these stomach pains, and I would take her to the bus stop, and then she couldn't get on the bus, so I'd have to go back home with her. And then, an hour later, she was fine. So we ended up taking her to a GI specialist, and we found out that she was lactose intolerant, because in the area that I lived in, it wasn't an area with a lot of minorities. So the doctors were not really thinking about, minority kids, really prone to, become lactose intolerant from milk. And so when we found this out, I asked the doctor's office, how did you diagnose this problem? And they told me that it was because of a breath analyzer machine that they had. And I said, could I look at it? And they showed it to me, and I called the company up and said, wow, this is a very interesting piece of equipment, and you have the only one. Have you ever talked to Johnson & Johnson? And because J&J owned Lactate. And they said they had been trying to talk to J&J for like 10 years. And I said, well, let me see what I could do. So I knew the people in J&J. And so, it was my first time of really hearing what due diligence was. So, J&J gave me the opportunity to do the due diligence on this company. And I put a deal together, and everybody did extremely well. And at the day of the whole, grouping of both companies, I was given a Lactate watch, for the gift. And my boss talked to me after that, and she said, look, I just want you to know I appreciate all the stuff you do for us, and I think it's time for you to go and start your own business.
Wow.
And she said, look at all the things you do. You're head of toxicology, for this one company. You're head of the lab animal program. So you develop the drugs, you take care of the animals. Now you're bringing in new products to J&J. And I said, nah, I'm good. I had the minivan and the kids, and I was like, nah, I'm good. And she said, look, trust me, you will be fine. And I went out and started the company in the basement like most people do. Mm-hmm. And I went back to my, some of the old companies that I had worked at. SmithKline gave me a fantastic contract to do scientific lecture series for the company. And then I had another company that I work with right now that is a research company that was buying supplies, a lot of research supplies. And he was complaining because he had to pay so much money for them. I said, well, how much are you spending a year? He said, man, I spend $1 million a year, and you would think I could get better pricing. And I said, well, let me see what I could do. So I went out and contacted some of the companies like the Thermo Fishers that you hear about, and the VWR, which is now Avantor. And I became a supplier for those companies. And then I was, ended up growing, and I was able to get things from the same manufacturer. And so I started providing to that one company. That's how we literally started selling supplies, from one person having a need and looking at, well, how can I help that company with their problem? Because he had told me what his problem was. And it's pretty easy to figure out, he was still a small business, but it's obvious that the reps that were supporting him were not listening to him and realizing that he was willing to make a change. Okay. So I took that information to literally start another segment of the business. So we call that SciMed. The SciMed division is our product side of the business. And now we sell, to the federal government and universities and industry also. And that's became a major part of our business. That's how it started.
Oh, wow. When did you start it? When did you start TMG?
Yeah, so that whole time frame was actually 1996.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And we started in Pennsylvania. And so it's interesting because the Minority Supplier Development Council became a very integral part of our business. And I share this with, I have a contract. I won a 15-year contract at a university, and the person that was running the contract opportunity asked me, was I a member of the Minority Supplier Development Council? And I said, yeah. And he said, which one? And I told him. He called them right on the phone when I was in his office to make sure I was telling the truth.
Really?
Yeah. It was really, really amazing. And then they said, oh yeah. Irving, yeah, we know Irving. He helps us out with all our programs and all that. And this guy said he had never met a minority that was involved in biomedical research. And he said, we do a lot of that, and we just don't see companies like yours. So I bid on a contract to run the biomedical research program at this university. And not only did we win the contract against a $1 billion company,
Wow.
I got the contract for 15 years. So
I was about to comment on that.
Yeah.
Is that a common occurrence in that industry?
Never,
15 years?
Never.
That's remarkable to me. 15 years.
Yeah, never. And I think we're probably in like year 12 now or something. Maybe like 13. Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I don't want to put the guy's name out there because everybody.
I don't want you to, right? But you were kicked out of your company to start your own.
Yeah.
And things have kind of blossomed since then. When you look, so that was, you said 1990 what?
6.
1960.
Yeah, that's when we started the business. Yeah.
Okay. When you look back over your shoulder, Dr. McConnell, what do you see as your biggest challenges and hurdles versus your bigger wins?
Yeah. So I'll tell you about a big win, but let me tell you about a hurdle.
Okay.
Because people constantly talk about funding for minority businesses. So the first contract that I won in the federal government was to manage the biomedical research program at CDC, and that was against the same company that I won this other contract against.
So you became their nightmare.
Oh, I still am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you 8A at the time? Have you ever been 8A?
Yeah. I was in the 8A program, and the good and the bad about the 8A program is that I was in the 8A program, did well, but I was not able to finish in the 8A program because while I was in the 8A program, I got called on active duty to go into Iraq. So, and then I got hurt while I was in Iraq. And then if you look at the time from when I was in Iraq and then I was in the hospital, that was 2 years of my 8A program. And
wow.
So I am the person that fought to change the rule, which has been changed. But my 8A rep in the Philadelphia area helped me with this, and we're responsible for changing that. If you are in the U.S. military as a reservist and you get called on active duty, your time in the 8A program is frozen. Now,
it should be.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
For you.
Yeah, because it was not. And everybody said it was. They would have to make an executive order to make that change, and so we actually went after it, and we made the change, and I was acknowledged at a SBA meeting down in Philadelphia because of that. But I was not able to be grandfathered in. But so all the companies now, benefit from that.
I was going to ask you, were you even able to benefit from it?
Yeah.
So trailblazer.
Yeah.
That sounds like one of the challenges and obstacles, and anything else that you can remember.
Yeah. So when you look at the whole financing piece, so when I won the contract at CDC, I had a mentor by the name of Walter Lomax in Philadelphia, and Walter Lomax had been a physician that had started a business having docs in different prisons, and he had other IT companies, and I went to talk to him about my funding problem and to manage this project at CDC, and he pointed out to me the difficulty in getting funds, and he said, I'll help you. And I said,
Mm,
I'm not coming to you for help. He said, I know you're not. That's why I'm going to help you. And
mm,
I told him, Dr. Lomax, I do not want your help. I need you to explain to me how to do this. So I ended up going to a bank that had a SBA loan program, and I was able to get the loan. Because the bank in my local town would not give me the money because they said, what happens if CDC closes down? And I asked them, you got to be kidding me. This is the Centers for Disease Control. They're not going to close down. And
mm-hmm.
that bank came to me later on after I, received several contracts and apologized. But it's interesting to see how, you're treated when you're on top compared to when
Sure.
you're not on top. But what happened over the years, I had several projects, and people understand business is up and down. So I did extremely well, and then I hit I hit a downfall that hit me like you would never know you could be hit that hard. I used to run all the dog programs for the military. So I took care of 1,500 dogs for DOD in San Antonio, Texas, and bred the dogs for the military and the TSA program. So I was probably the largest dog person in the world, really. Those are great contracts.
Wow.
And because of President Obama's executive order for insourcing, I lost all those contracts overnight, and all of my employees became government employees. So I lost a lot of work, learned some key lessons about what to do when something like that happens, which I share with businesses all the time now, so people don't make the same mistake. But what happened financially from a banking position, it devastated me. And the bank that I had basically said, "Oh, we can't help you anymore." And because they said, I don't think you're going to pull out of this. So I did the grind, just like when I got back from Iraq. I did the grind, built the business back up. So I was able to build it back up. And I was at and Sharon, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, because you and I had a just real friendly words one day. It was at one of the golf programs over at Woodmore, and I just finished playing golf, and there was a table that said VIPs only, and I was looking for a place to sit, and Roland Martin was there, and I had been just joking with him about HBCU schools, so I'm thinking I'll sit here with Roland and some other people and have a great time. And you said, "Well, this is for the VIPs." And I said, "Well, who's a VIP?" And she said, "I'll tell you what, why don't you sit over there? You got Marriott there, you got M&T Bank, and you got." So, all right. So I go over there and I sit down. Now I'm in a situation where I need some more relationships. And I'm sitting down next to M&T Bank. And this young vice president starts talking to me. And we just had this conversation. And I'm looking at him as a young vice president.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
And he told me he could, he asked me about my business, and I told him, and then he told me, he'd like to follow up with me. And I'm thinking, oh man, my problem's a little bit too, I think a little bit too big for you, and he said, no, let me come out. So he came out, and I would tell you, it's probably one of the best meetings and one of the best times that I have spent. So I don't know, it cost me like $100 to be in the golf tournament or something, but it was
the return on that time, right?
It's huge. It was so huge. It's amazing. And now I have like several, like when people talk about banking relationships, I have like really true hardcore banking relationships with that particular bank. And I feel so good about it, because I could be trying to do anything and I call them up, and they're like, "Hey, no problem. What do you need?" And so it's that the importance. So I say that for two things. One, it's so hard to get funding, but if you allowed me, Sharon, to sit at that VIP table,
You're wasting your time.
Roland and I just would have been joking about HBCU schools and wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But you said, why don't you go sit over there? Because I think that'd be a good table for you, you know. And I sat over there, and I can even tell you other stories because Marriott was there, and I ended up getting into the hotel business also, which is a whole nother story.
See, I should have known that, because you know why? Because I came up with that idea of, when you come off the green, we would set up these corporate roundtables for MBEs, because the rule is you don't talk it on the course, but if you could have lunch with someone, because the young man you're talking about didn't play.
Right. He plays.
He came to host. He's a sharp young man. He came to host that roundtable. So I never knew that story. So my idea worked. So I'm glad to hear that.
So the funny thing about it, a couple of weeks ago, he called me up on a Sunday about 9:00 at night, and I picked it up because I saw his name. I said, because he would never call me, and he had just recently brought a dog, and his dog was sick, and it really had a allergic reaction, which was really bad. And he was like, what do I do? And I said, well, there's two good emergency clinics, but I said, it's probably gonna cost you about $3,000 to $4,000, to take care of this problem. And I said, or you could do this and give your dog this 3 times a day for the next couple of days, and you'll probably be fine. But I probably shouldn't be telling you that because I haven't seen your dog and I don't have a client-patient relationship with you. But, wink, wink, I would probably do that and try to save $3,000 or $4,000. And he did that, and it cured his dog, and he's,
You saved the dog.
So, but I was so glad I could help him because he's helped me out tremendously in any time of need that I've ever had.
That is so good to hear. I never knew that, Dr. McConnell. I never knew that. And so that sounds like some great obstacles. Let me just ask you a couple of questions as we kind of bring this to closure.
Sure.
What has the pandemic? So you've had some highs and lows tied to some very important times during the course of your business. But how has the pandemic impacted your business, and what advice do you have there for folks that are going through it?
Yeah, so for me, I think the other downfalls or the other obstacles probably helped me to get through the pandemic. So, I always look at it as an opportunity. Like you look at and I try to tell people, when we have a war, it's like one of the worst things that you could ever have. But I guarantee you, there are people, seeking the opportunities of war. Mm-hmm. So when the pandemic hit, it wasn't necessarily I came out to really look at and seek opportunities because of a pandemic. I sat down with my staff and had a brainstorming meeting and said, okay, this is what's happening. Now, how do we get through this? Now, most of my contracts, I was able to maintain the people on contracts and they could work from home because a lot of the work that we do, if it's research in animals, those people still had to go to work because they had to take care of the animals. But positions that I had that were administrative, like people were able to work from home, but I knew we were going to have dips. And what would happen, I keep a very, very large network of people, and I let people know when I'm down, and I let people know what I do. And there's a young lady that had called me, and she was on the White House team, and they were looking for supplies. And she told them, I know a business. that the guy has a military background, and I know
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have them. He can get it. And she called me up on a Saturday because they were working, and then that's when I started realizing that there was a serious problem in getting supplies. And I knew there was a problem, but I didn't realize how bad it was. So we had to regroup and figure out how can we help customers that need supplies, and then the suppliers that we buy things from couldn't get supplies also. So I said, if I can become a link even for those larger organizations that cannot procure stuff, uh, that could be a win-win for us. So that was one of the approaches that we did. We looked at our customers, and we called them up and looked at their problems. So we called NIH up, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a warehouse within NIH where they basically provide supplies to a lot of the different institutes, and we know the people that do the buying, and we called them up and said, what is it that you can't get? And that's one of the things that we've always been good at in finding things and doing projects that most people don't want to do. Most people don't want to work with anthrax or Ebola. So, we'll do that. So when it comes to supplies, they couldn't get thermometers, and they needed thermometers like right away. So
Mm-hmm.
we were able to get them, and I hand carried them to them so they would have them like right away. And then they needed masks, and they needed gowns, and then not so much looking at, some people will call it a pivot, but I looked at the need. So when you look at the PPE world, who
Sure.
needed it? So a lot of people don't realize that funeral parlors have to have PPE supplies, but nobody had supplies. So I looked at not only the medical side, but what are the other places that need PPE supplies? And let's go after those markets also, because everybody's not going to be that resource to them. So, fortunately, again, I grew up in the DC area. So I know some of the family owned funeral parlors, and I asked them,
Mm-hmm.
what are your problems? And they said,
Mm-hmm.
we can't get gowns, we can't get gloves. And I said, I got gowns, I got gloves. And so we were able to support a lot of people that we would normally not support. There's a well-known construction business in the area that needed a lot of PPE stuff. That's one of the Minority Supplier Development Council members, and he had the same problem because he had to keep things running, and he had to have his staff with masks on. Then they had to have gloves and sanitizers. And that's a business that we had never gone after. We had never looked at the construction business because people look at us, supporting research and medical related stuff. So we actually were able to increase our business by tapping into other areas. And then when you look at universities were trying to figure out what to do. And then a lot of towns, what I call like in the black belt. So I spent a lot of time in Alabama because, again, that's where a lot of my roots came from in a pivotal point in my life. So
Mm-hmm.
I called down to Tuskegee and called the health center, and I said, what are your pain points? And they said, we have 2 masks, we have 1
Wow.
gown. And I said, how does that happen in Tuskegee, Alabama?
Right.
And I said, what do you need? And they told me what they needed. And they said, well, we haven't gotten enough funding. I said, don't worry about it, I'm sending it to you.
Wow.
And because that's a place that should not have problems today. But what happened, that doctor contacted all the doctors in Alabama and said, let me just tell you what the McConnell Group did. And then the next thing I know, we're getting orders from other places in Alabama because of our gift to a little health clinic in Tuskegee, Alabama.
Mm.
So it's interesting how things, go around. And so we had ended up, we had to hire a couple more people because we were getting more orders than we had ever gotten before. And again, being in biomedical research, I'm probably, saying too much where people may try to jump in my business space, but when you look at biomedical research, people have to have the same PPE on to do biomedical research. So if you're doing with primates, you have to have gowns on, you have to have masks, and you have to have goggles and face shields, and none of that stuff was available. So we became that supplier at a larger number than we had before, because we reached out to them and we knew they couldn't figure out how to get it. So we started buying direct from China. We put a warehouse up in Frederick, Maryland, and it changed the way we do business today. Yeah.
And it sounds like you bring to the party all this accumulation of wealth of knowledge, and whether it was from your time in Tuskegee, whether it was your time in the service, whether your time in the reserve, because as I'm listening to you, and I said, that sounds like the Army in him. He could logistically put that stuff together really fast. And that's what I admire about folks with military backgrounds in terms of being able to see that problem and to go after it. Do you look at that as the pandemic kind of progresses on, and we're looking at things now like the variants that are coming up, but things are getting together with the vaccine and that kind of thing, and then you look at what's happening in the corner of the world called India? Do you see kind of opportunities there, or what do you see in the future as we look at this pandemic from your vantage point?
Yeah, so one of the things that we just completed, so Thermo Fisher helped out 10 historically Black colleges by providing the supplies and equipment to set up COVID laboratories. And one of the historically Black colleges contacted us and asked us, could we set the lab up for them and then staff it? So we just completed that task, and that was a lot of fun for us, because again, from an operational standpoint and understanding operational readiness, we were able to look at what they had, go through the process to ensure that they get CLIA certified, which is having a clinical lab, and then finding the people to staff. And because all these things are getting harder and harder to do right now, so the opportunities are not just local. It's actually at a global setting. So if people had connections in India, this is the time to actually get involved with India. I was over in India with Governor O'Malley and Rashawn Baker when they had the it was more of a biomedical trip going over, and they had the president of the University of Maryland. So I was able to see India firsthand and look at the opportunities there. And with COVID hitting there, and that's it's almost like I wouldn't call it a pivot. I just call it more of a lateral extension of what you do. So if you look at what you do now, you could literally look at India and look at how you could apply the skill sets and your capabilities in India. But a lot of people, we just don't look at these other opportunities because it seems like it's a long way. And there's all kind of programs to help you get through those hurdles, but many of us just don't know about them. Again, which has helped me is literally being in the military. So I've been all around the world, and I understand cultures, and I understand how to work with embassies, and I understand USAID, I understand World Bank, I understand the Inter-American Development Bank. And these are places that a lot of us don't think about looking at opportunities. Like a lot of people go to the federal government or they go to the industry. They don't realize you could go on the World Bank website right now and you'll see contract opportunities. You can go to the Inter-American Development Bank, which is right downtown Washington, D.C., and they have contract opportunities. But my military background gave me the insight for all of that. So, at some point, I just really know I need to just stop working, because there's so much work out there that you can continuously do. And I challenge people, if you can't find business, and I get calls from this all the time. I gave a talk to the veterans group the VIP group here in Maryland, and I must have got 10 phone calls just trying to help veterans understand how to find business, because there's business out there. It's like people tell me you can't find a job. There's so many jobs out there, and I tell people, look at who just won a contract. If you don't have a job, you can go on sam.gov, betasam.gov. You can see who won a contract. Look at if it's in, science, if it's in communications, and I guarantee you that company needs people like you. And you'll not read that in a book. It's just another way of looking at where the opportunities are.
I've learned so much today in terms of the lateral, not looking at it as pivotal as opposed to being the lateral connection. I mean, extension, to look at your relationships. So it's like your relationships throughout this whole cycle in terms of the longevity of your company. It's also been about the collection of your relationships, and then looking beyond what you can see and understand that what else you can do. I think that they are all great lessons.
Okay.
And guess what, Dr. McConnell? You are our VIP. You are. You are absolutely our VIP.
Well, thank you.
So I thank you. And I will always remember you were one of our top 100 Minority Business Award winners in our last top 100. And the conversation you had with my granddaughter, who is very interested in being a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And so you just seemed like the kind of person who's always giving of himself, evident by or always demonstrated by the things that I see you do. And so on behalf of the world, we say thank you for everything that you do. Very interesting story. Wish I had more time to talk about it, because I know there's lots more story here, but there was an untold story as far as we were concerned that I think that we uncovered today. And so Dr. McConnell, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, that is kind of like the end of this particular episode, but it's not the end of our story. We will continue to bring to you the untold story, or stories rather, of minority businesses. As we kind of wind out, I want to actually thank some more sponsors, if we can look at that. And for those who are just listening, we certainly want to thank AARP, AT&T, BAE Systems, Bank of America, BWI, Thurgood Marshall International Airport, Dominion Energy, the Ellison Group, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FRS, Horseshoe Casino or Caesars Entertainment, Ideal, Leidos, Lockheed Martin, M&T Bank, we're just talking about them, Marriott, McCormick, Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority, National Bid Network, Northrop Grumman, Peapod, Sodexo, Truist, United States Postal Service, Washington Gas, Metro, WSSC Water, Wells Fargo, and Zillion Technologies. Until the next time, we'd like to thank our production company, Graybow, and I'd like to thank our team, the CRMSCC Business Consortium, that consists of the Council, the MBDA Business Center, Washington, D.C., the MBDA Federal Procurement Center. In particular, go to www.crmsdccares.com to not only see this episode again and again, but to see our other episodes as well as our webinars and all the newsletters and the plethora of information that we've placed out during the last year or so. And so we know just how important this information is, and we are appreciative of the opportunity to bring it with you. And so until next time, stay tuned, and we'll see you again. Thank you.